Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. I'm your host, George Kerth, here along with the one and only Cody Roadcap. Cody, what is up?
Not much, George. Not much at all. We had football over the weekend, so that's always a good sign. A lot of stuff to get into today. I'm just excited to be here. Missing Snyder. As you see, he's not with us, but it'll be a good show, just the two of us, which is becoming the new normal around here.
Don't worry, he'll be back with us here soon, but we have football to talk about, so we can't linger on it too much. We are going to recap all the stories of the week, which includes a lot of talk about week one of the preseason, and we're going to do a little bit of fun talk about who we think could be bounce back players here in 2021. We will post about that and more on our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the Couch GMs, and on thecouchgms.com. But with no further ado, why don't we jump into some NFL news? And Cody, this is something that was trending on social media after the Jaguars preseason game. I don't think anyone missed it. Did you happen to see the block heard around the world?
Like you just said, I don't think anybody missed it, and I didn't either. I saw even ex-players retweeting it and saying how shameful it was that a guy who didn't even, number 6 tight end, didn't play any special teams, and then put that on tape. If you haven't guessed by now, we were referring to former Jacksonville Jaguars tight end Tim Tebow. He was being cut after I'll say, poor performance, I'll say it nicely, attempting to throw a block, which ended up him on the ground and blocking his own teammate. So
there was more than one, too. I saw at least 3 blocking highlights and one highlight where he ran an incorrect route and basically the running back caught it right in front of him and then he missed another block. So
yeah, rough day for the former baseball player, former quarterback. That was probably the end of Tim Tebow in the NFL. It was short-lived. Congrats to him for, at least attempting to make the comeback, the position switch. I know all the people out there that was like, draft Tim Tebow late. He's going to get 5 touchdowns. He didn't even make it to preseason week 2 because surprisingly the NFL decided to go back on their cut down being one day and all teams had to cut 5 players, which I thought was a little bit odd that after the first preseason game, you have to cut 5. Yeah, I don't understand that one at all. I was like, you must now trim your roster to 85. And Tim Tebow did not make it to the final 85. Let's go back to just one cut down day, the end of preseason, cut it from 90 to 53. I know it's a lot of hurt feelings then, and it sucks for all the guys that lose a potential job, but makes it a lot easier, makes preseason a little bit more interesting. So, George, you got a question?
I mean, I don't want to do the math, but no, I was gonna go. At least now we have whatever 32 times 5 is less hurt hearts on that final day.
Gotcha. 32 plus 5. Let's see if I can do mental.
32 times 5.
Oh, that's just a mere 160 hearts right there. I think that's enough talk about people getting cut. Tim Tebow. The highlight of preseason week 1 was definitely the rookie quarterbacks that we all got to see take the field for the first time, and then some non-rookie quarterbacks that had their first experiences that didn't get to play last year. But let's start it off, which I believe in Chicago, they are already crowning the MVP.
Yep.
He might not even be getting the start. I believe all the hype right now is for Justin Fields, who looked pretty impressive. I'm not going to lie. We had our Dynasty rookie draft the day before, and I ended up with Justin Fields as the 3rd quarterback taken. That week on Saturday made me pretty happy. He looked good. He's going to be a lot of fun there in Chicago. But Andy Dalton even said he has a bright future, but it's not going to start now or something. I don't remember the exact quote. Didn't make our quotes of the week, but I know Andy Dalton still thinks he's the starter there. Chicago will probably still start Andy Dalton for at least the first few weeks. So Justin Fields stands. Hang on. Probably looked the best of the bunch. I think PFF had him rated the highest if I'm out of the rookies, I believe, if I remember correctly. So what were your overall thoughts on Justin Fields if you were able to catch that game?
I did watch pieces of it, mostly when Justin Fields was on the field. That's actually going to be really weird to say when he actually does start. But He did look impressive. He was very mobile, which is part of his skill set. He ran for a touchdown, if I'm remembering correctly, and his
He
mobility
did.
ended up leading to another wide open touchdown pass. So just the ability to stretch the defense is there. And that's going to help him as a rookie trying to transition into the NFL because he's going to be able to make things seem slower when being able to stretch the play, move outside the pocket. And I think there was a quote from him that also didn't make quotes of the week, but he said the game felt slow and everyone just started bashing him because, like, dude, it's the preseason. But I think that's actually a big reason why it felt slow to him.
Yeah, he gave credit to going up against the Bears defense every day in practice, which we have talked about on this show on numerous occasions. How they, despite their quarterback issues, they're still a top 10 to top 5 defense in the league. So I do think it's a huge benefit for him to practice with them. And his performance earned him a few extra starts with the ones. Matt Nagy did say this was always a part of the plan, but he is getting a few snaps with the ones after his performance. So Justin Fields probably looked the best of all the rookie quarterbacks. Then we did have Trevor Lawrence, the number 1 pick. He looked pretty good as well. I should say most of these quarterbacks looked decent in their first appearances. Now, some of them did have their ups and downs, which is expected. It's their first time. And how Trevor Lawrence looked wasn't the big takeaway for me. It was how much he intended or targeted, I should say, wide receiver Marvin Jones. I feel like every year Marvin Jones is underrated when it comes to the draft. He's always round 10 or later. And this looks like a guy, if you can get him late in your draft, perfect candidate for a flyer, potentially the number 1 wide receiver. He's going to compete with DJ Chark for the number 1 role. Both those guys could put up decent numbers. He'll probably go 3 to 5 rounds later than DJ Chark is going. And if he already is developing a connection this early in camp with Trevor Lawrence, you only expect that to blossom throughout the rest of the season. So keep an eye on Marvin Jones. And Trevor Lawrence, I think, looked as good as advertised as being the number 1 pick. Had a few growing pains, but I liked him. What were your thoughts on the good old boy from Clemson?
I mean, he looked as good as advertised, in my opinion. You're going to have some growing pains moving from college to the NFL, but I think there's not really much to talk about with Trevor Lawrence, almost like there wasn't much to talk about pre-draft. Like, we kind of always talked about the Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Mac Jones conversation more than Trevor Lawrence, because Trevor Lawrence was always the lock. And he hasn't, again, now that he has game film on him, I still don't have anything to think otherwise. And I also really agree about Marvin Jones there. We talked a lot in the last few weeks doing our mock drafts about guys you can take in offenses later than their counterparts. Marvin Jones and DJ Chark is a great example because we've talked about also the DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson one, maybe even Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. Marvin Jones is definitely on my radar now.
For sure. And he's always been a solid option. The guy that like nobody wants to trade for, but everybody wants on their team. That's how I would explain Marvin Jones. And you made a great point about no one really talking about Trevor Lawrence. They already put him in the star category. I know I ranted about this a little bit last week, but I believe I saw the graphic that was it Bleacher Report or BR Gridiron, which are pretty much the same site. They put out like these stars don't wear visors, but what if they did? And it was a picture of 4 of them, and it was Rodgers, Mahomes, Russell Wilson, and Trevor Lawrence. And I was like, guys, please, he hasn't played a real snap. Can we not put Trevor Lawrence? I was like, I
Now,
don't
you
understand.
talked about the old talk about when Carson Wentz was a rookie, saying he has the pre-snap of Manning and the post-snap, or whatever the heck it was. I don't even know. Trevor Lawrence is getting even more of that vibe, and he's not even being talked about. I don't understand how you're not hearing his name, but you're hearing his name in these ridiculous scenarios at the same time. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, we know he's good. We talked about him being a generational draft pick, but hold your horses a little bit, especially when it comes to fantasy. Like, he's a rookie. He's going to have growing pains. Even Patrick Mahomes, as great as he was, he sat for a year. So don't expect him to just take the league by storm. And he's also on Jacksonville, which isn't a very good roster from top to bottom.
Yeah.
But, if we talk about another rookie, he might have had the highlight play of the week, but probably the worst overall performance of the main 4 rookies that got their starts, and that is quarterback Trey Lance. Now, his second pass, he did show off his arm strength, and he went deep on a nice crossing route that ended up in the end zone. The receiver that caught it is slipping my head at the moment, but that doesn't matter. We're talking Trey Lance. He's one of my favorite prospects. Now, like I said, he is very raw as well. He came from North Dakota State. Yeah, North Dakota State, just like Carson Wentz did. So definitely a small
Yep.
school. So he might not break out as quickly. Jimmy Garoppolo is still in line to start there. Again, we'll see how long that's in place. And it's also a good thing to point out that Trey Lance, I believe the number is 23. That's the most passes he's ever thrown in a game, or at least during
Wow.
his college career. Um, so not a guy. He has the arm, but North Dakota State is so good that they were always up by so much, and they would run. And he moves well and uses his legs well. So he's just has a lot to learn when it comes to passing the ball. And you saw that on the game. You saw the inconsistencies. I believe he was the lowest rated PFF rated rookie quarterback out of these big four. I'm sorry, I'm not paying attention to what Kellen Mond did out in Minnesota. Maybe he had
Oh
a great
yeah,
game.
no, me neither. Yeah.
I apologize to all the Vikings fans out there listening. I hope Kellen Mond works out for you. I really do. But I'm not comparing him when I'm talking about rookies. I'm talking about the big four. And Trey Lance, again, he had the flashiest play, but he also, to me, looked like the guy that needed the most grooming still to go. I mean, a lot of these guys need a lot of things to go, but he seemed to be the one with the most inconsistencies. And that could just be also a point to that the Shanahan offense is always hard for players to grasp in year one, and you often see year two leaps. So I look for Trey Lance to be right up there with the top quarterbacks out of this rookie class. Definitely a guy I was trying to get in all my dynasty leagues. If you're still doing a dynasty startup or you haven't done your rookie dynasty draft yet, don't be afraid to take Trey Lance. We talked about ours. He went number 6 overall in our dynasty rookie league, first quarterback taken. So he definitely has potential. Um, but I've rambled enough about Trey Lance because he's one of my favorite quarterback prospects. So I'll let George talk about him a little bit. So you can not listen to me just ramble about my guy.
Well, I mean, a lot of what you said just feeds into what I was going to say of coming into the draft, we knew he was the most raw talent. On top of the fact that you said he hasn't thrown more than 23, 24 passes in a game. He also did not start many games. If I understand, he missed a full season at one point in his college career for an injury. So he's a work in progress. When you're talking about taking him first in dynasty drafts, it's because he shows a lot of long-term promise. In redraft leagues this year, you can take a risk if you think like late that you think he could end up starting by week 4 or 5. I think it's honestly more likely that if he starts, it's going to be late in the year when you're already going to have cut him because you needed the roster spot to fill buys or whatever it might be. So it depends on where you're looking in your fantasy, spectrum. If you're playing Dynasty, Trey Lance is still a good option. He showed the promise that made him be drafted 3rd overall. Don't take it away, even though he had a little bit of a rough start. But in redraft, he's going to take some time to get into the starting role. I don't think anything's changed there. Before we move on to the other of the big four, I did go and look at Kellen Mond's stats just for you, Cody. Seems a little rough. 6 of 16 for 53 yards. No touchdowns, no picks. Very modest. They probably tried to protect him, but there's a lot of incompletions in there.
Yeah,
I
and don't
mean,
forget Kellen Mond. He did miss some time with all the Vikings quarterback. They all missed some times on the COVID list. So as a rookie, that's even more difficult. I'm just going to circle back real quick before we move on to Zach Wilson to Trey Lance for your fantasy advice. Completely agree. The only time I'm even drafting Trey Lance is if I'm playing Superflex, and I'm trying to get him as my third quarterback,
mhm.
because in Superflex quarterbacks have definitely a higher value, so you're often taking 3 and sometimes 4. So if I can get a guy like Trey Lance or Justin Fields as a potential third option with high upside in Superflex, I will do that. But let's talk about quarterback Zach Wilson of the New York Jets. Again, I feel like we sound like a broken record. He looked pretty good for his first start. It wasn't
Yeah.
terrible. It wasn't the best. There's still room to improve. I would probably put him number 3 out of these 4 behind Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, and then Zach Wilson if I had to rank them, because everybody loves rankings. But just like Trevor Lawrence, this guy seemed to target one guy, and for fantasy, that's what we're looking for. Um, they were on the field pretty much the same amount of time, and then when they were on the field, he was targeting him, and that was wide receiver Corey Davis, formerly of the Tennessee Titans. He came over this year in free agency and was shown an early chemistry with Corey Davis. I know there's a lot of people out there that were big Elijah Moore fans and were like, that's going to be the Wilson and Moore. They're going to grow together. It still could happen, but right now it points to Corey Davis. Um, Denzel Mims, his second round pick last year, he's looked like he's fallen to number 3 behind those two at this point. Again, we're still only week 1, and we're trying to overreact to anything we're saying here. We're just seeing it how it was. Zach Wilson looked pretty good. Definitely had some room to grow. You could see his gunslinger mentality. He showed off his arms. He reminded me a little bit of Matt Stafford, the way he can, throw from any platform. He just has a live arm, which you love to watch a quarterback when they're playing against him. I'm really excited this week because I'll get a very up close and view of him when they take on the Green Bay Packers. So looking forward to that. I know they've had some offensive line protection issues as well. He's been a little shaky about getting the ball out in time, taking a few extra sacks. So those are all things you expect from a rookie. But overall, I've been impressed with all the rookies so far. How about you, George?
I agree. Zach Wilson, I would also put third. There was no busts really, which is shocking. I feel like there's normally some of these rookies that come out there and just, I don't know if it's nerves or just getting used to the speed of the game. They just come out and kind of go flat. If this keeps up, this could be one of the best quarterback classes we've seen in a while. And the even more crazy thing about it is these are all guys that were taken in the early first round. Normally if you see 4 or 5 quarterbacks coming out of a class, it's because you have a second or third rounder that kind of snuck in there and did really well, like example of Russell Wilson. But these guys all look solid. We're going to see, obviously, we'll check back in with this group after week 2 of the preseason. They're all going to get plenty of time, I'm sure. And we'll see if we have the same exact vibe. But again, also Corey Davis, another person that's sneaking onto that late round flyer board. We're going to see the Jets have a very crowded group of wide receivers that are all very similar in skill level. The other one you didn't mention was, who do we have? Jamison Crowder. Jamison Crowder. So there's another name in there as well. Braxton Berrios, who we all love to tease a little bit. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that offense plays out. But if Zach Wilson keeps playing how he did in week 1 and he starts coming into his own, he could support 2 or 3 fantasy wide receivers, which we haven't seen out of the Jets in a long time. Right now, though, we're just trying to find the number 1, and the number 1 looks like it's Corey Davis.
I couldn't agree more. And I know we're talking rookie quarterbacks. I do have to get a little Jordan Love shout out. I know he's not a rookie, but he was not active for any game last year. There was no preseason. So this was his first live NFL action. And although he did get injured near the end of the second half, which cut his night short, surprisingly, he looked impressive. The one thing that stuck out to me, now, again, this is the game I've watched twice now because I'm obsessed with the Packers, and that's a huge problem. But the very first play of the game was a called run. The dude stood up from the line and threw it to the wide receiver because the cornerback was 10 yards off. Now, if you watch any Packers game, you've seen Aaron Rodgers do that 9, 10 times a game, 9 out of 10 times. That's a value. He's taking it. So he's watching. Everything you've seen from his progression, his footwork looks better. So Jordan Love, it will be interesting to watch. Hopefully he is back from his injury. I know he might not play against the Jets this week. So not so much fantasy advice, but Jordan Love could be interesting to when we get into next offseason's hashtag Rodgers watch. But if we're going to talk quarterbacks, we got to talk about the 2 most enticing quarterback battles in the NFL, and that's the Denver Broncos and the New Orleans Saints. Let's get in to the first game with the Denver Broncos. It's Drew Lock.
It's Drew Lock.
I sound like okay. Hang on, Cody. Do not overreact to one preseason game. Cody, do not overreact to one preseason game.
I'll give you a second to temper yourself here. It was a funny interaction with Ian Rappaport, who I follow on Twitter. After Trey Lance threw his big touchdown on the second pass, he started, he typed out a tweet that was, "Do not overreact about the preseason. Do not overreact about the preseason." Tom Pelissero went back and roasted him on a hit he had from 2013. These old tweets exposed kind of thing. It was pretty funny. You go check it out. I can probably retweet it on our Twitter, the Couch GMs. So
yeah, let's retweet it from the Couch GMs so people know what we're talking about. Because I would definitely love to check that one out. But Drew Lock, he was a second round pick. I think this would be year 3 for him, and he had good numbers. I mean, it was 5 for 7 for 151 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's not going to be a stat line every week. They're not going to have 2 bomb touchdowns every game. And Teddy Bridgewater played well. He was 7 of 8 for 74 yards and 1 touchdown. But
Teddy
for me,
Bridgewater played a Teddy Bridgewater game.
exactly. You took the words right out of my
Yes.
mouth. Drew Lock has the potential, has the upside that if I'm going to roll with the quarterback, it's going to be the guy. I know I don't want to compare him to Brett Favre because he is by far not on Brett Favre's level. I'm not saying that at all. But if you think back to Brett Favre, there was going to be games where he threw 4 picks and you just lived with it because of the upside potential. Drew Lock isn't at that talent left where you're like, okay, I can deal with a 4-pick game. But he shows that gunslinger mentality that, hey, I want to push the ball down the field. I'm going to get a lot out of my guys. We're going to try to score points and we're going to go for it. And I like that in the quarterback. You know, Teddy Bridgewater, very safe. 7 for 8, 74 yards and a touchdown. You love that. And maybe that's all Denver needs because they have a good defense. Vic Fangio is probably the best defensive coordinator in all of the NFL. And maybe they just need a guy that won't turn it over like we saw the year they won with Peyton Manning until they had to pull him because he was turning the ball over too much, but then he came back and won a Super Bowl. They just need a guy to be consistent. But for me, I'm taking Drew Lock. And along with Drew Lock, don't overreact to the KJ Hamler. I know he had some big plays. I don't believe Cortland Sutton played in the game as he's still recovering from his ACL injury. Maybe he did. I can't remember off the top of my head. I don't believe he played. Jerry Jeudy looked good. So there's still a lot of wide receiver options. Noah Fant in Denver. And if you have that high powered of weapons, give me the guy that's going to push the ball down the field and give me Drew Lock. It was a fun game to watch for them. Are you with me? Are you saying Drew Lock? Because I know they said, hey, after game 2, we'll probably name the starter. And I believe they're going to switch. I believe Bridgewater will officially get the start, and then Locke will come in. So it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out this week.
They're so deep at wide receiver at the same time. Like, the quarterback playing with the number 2 receivers is not really even much of a drop off, but I think it's more the number 2 around, like in the offensive line in that kind of area. Even they have 2 good running backs, but I don't know. Fantasy me and what's best for Denver me are fighting each other in my head with this. Fantasy me wants Drew Lock to be the starter because exactly what you said, there's so much more big play potential. There's so much more potential to have maybe even 3 fantasy relevant wide receivers in that offense if Drew Lock plays. If Teddy Bridgewater plays, that might be the best thing for Denver because, like you said, they have such a good defense. He's a game manager. He's not going to turn the ball over. He's just going to take care of business, score enough points, and they're going to go win a lot of games if their defense can ball with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback. At this point, I think it's got to be Drew Lock after that start, but I almost wish that they would wait until after game 3 and give them both 2 more shots to prove it because you might see Drew Lock have a dud in there and it might make him rethink it. But if Drew Lock has 2 really good games and then throws a pick in his 3rd game, does it make a difference? You really don't know. It's tough, but
Yeah,
I think right now
true.
I'm Drew Lock with you.
Perfect. And like you said, there's still another week. They could both come out flat. One could definitely separate themselves. Maybe Teddy Bridgewater has a huge game and Drew Lock throws 2 picks. Then maybe we'll reconsider ourselves. But again, not trying to overreact. And I think if you're playing fantasy, if you want parts of that Denver offense, you want a guy like Drew Lock who's going to throw the ball all over the yard. And then the other quarterback matchup or quarterback
This was a
battle.
dud. Speaking of duds.
And not great. Was Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston. I didn't actually get to watch this game. I did catch some highlights. So I wasn't able to evaluate every play. But Jameis Winston, his stat line, 7 of 12, 96 yards, a touchdown, and interception. And Taysom Hill, 8 for 12, 81 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. I'm not sure. I can't remember off the top of my head how much he added via the run game because Taysom Hill tends to use his legs more than Jameis Winston. And again, it's too early to tell. We're going to need to see another week or 2. I'm sure knowing Sean Payton, he's not going to, tell you who the starter is until week 1 when they host the Green Bay Packers. Because he'll want to keep it a secret. That just seems like Sean Payton's type of coaching. I tend to believe it'll be Jameis Winston. I've been saying that all offseason, despite the massively fake contract they gave Taysom Hill. I think it'll be
Mhm.
Jameis Winston. I think if it's Winston, that benefits Kamara. It benefits Michael Thomas when he comes back, and it benefits the rest of the receiving core. But because Thomas is out and they don't have a true number two there, they're still working out the rest of their wide receivers. Maybe they will lean Taysom Hill because of his running ability. And if it is Taysom Hill, he's another guy that's probably not going to get drafted in redraft leagues unless it's a super flex that you might want to consider taking because of his running ability, because that is kind of a cheat code for quarterbacks. This one is definitely not clear cut. Still a few weeks to go, but one we'll definitely be keeping our eyes on.
So let me say, Taysom Hill did not register a rushing attempt. So that was kind of nice to see that they were trying to make him use the pass game to get down the field. But that also could have been why he did not look as good as Jameis Winston. But Jameis Winston, in my opinion, on watching the game, it looked like he was a quarterback that hadn't really played a game in 2 years. He started off rusty. He started to come back on after. He threw his interception first, then came back and had a touchdown drive. So I give it edge Winston after game one, and I really hope it is Jameis Winston to win that job. I think it does so much more for that offense than Taysom Hill, and they can keep Taysom Hill in the patented Taysom Hill role and have him play some tight end, some running back, and run some trick plays with the pass from the running back or whatever it might be. But I think Jameis Winston, would definitely benefit that offense so much more.
I couldn't agree more, George. But let's move on from some quarterbacks, talk a few rookie running backs, and I'm going to try to pronounce this guy's name. You think I would remember from the announcer screaming after his 91-yard score, which I believe was the first or second game to kick off the preseason. Nope. George, please tell everybody this guy's name because I don't want to make a fool of myself.
Pretty sure it's Ramondre Stevenson. Something like
Ramondre
that.
Stevenson. I'm pretty sure you nailed that. And I
Ramondre
was trying to
Stevenson.
sound it out in my head, and it was not going to be pretty. So, again, a guy, he had a 91-yard touchdown. It's hard not to overreact, but just remember what team he is on. He is on the New England Patriots. They have Damian Harris still. They have James White still. They have Sony Michel still. Where's he fit in? Yes, he's a rookie. He looked good. He made the most of his carries. I think he had the most rushing yards of any running back all of week one preseason. Granted, he did have a 91-yard, so take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. You're not touching him in redrafts because you're not touching a lot of the Patriots backfield, or at least you shouldn't be. Outside of Damian Harris, I'd let all the other ones go undrafted. Just my personal advice there for how I would handle the Patriots backfield.
He's not even really the second guy I would think about drafting. Like, I would take a flyer on James White first just because of the passing potential over.
Oh, for sure, especially if it's PPR. Then we're definitely considering James White as a late round flyer because he's an old reliable. He'll get 3 to 5 catches a game, and then you're just hoping for a touchdown.
Yep.
But I think James White is getting up there. Stevenson could be. I was going to try to say his first name again, and I chickened out. Ramondre Stevenson.
I believe in you.
He could be replacing the James White role as the season goes on. So maybe mid-season, he could be a high waiver guy if he ends up overtaking that role. I know some people are overreacting because I've said this like 4 times now, but we did have our dynasty rookie draft, so we watched him. I think he went in the 3rd round. I think it was.
Yeah, I traded a pick out, totally thinking it was going to be a Kenny Gainwell pick, and he came off the board with the pick I traded out. It was a shock.
So again, it could be a little bit of preseason bias, but if we're looking long term, he could be the number 2 guy, the pass catching option guy behind a guy like Damian Harris. But boy, they need to start Mac Jones. I don't want to go back to quarterbacks, but boy, Cam Newton looks very good. I don't know how.
And Cam Newton has apparently not been looking good at joint practice with the Eagles this week too. But we're gonna get back to that one a little bit later. A little bit of a teaser there for you. Little tease there. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit more running back. I've been a big advocate of avoiding the Denver backfield because of the Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon battle going on in camp. Javonte Williams looked good in his first game, putting a lot of pressure on Melvin Gordon to keep that job. I'm starting to believe the hype a little bit that Javonte Williams is going to be the guy to own in that backfield. I would still definitely grab Melvin Gordon as a, mid to late round pick if he's still on the board, because he's been a reliable running back, and I don't think they're going to completely phase him out just because of his contract number and everything he still has done to be effective. But Javonte Williams looks like he's a legit option there.
He did. I was a little surprised by that. He did have 5 carries for 29 yards. I know the first 4 went for like 7 each. Like he was averaging 7 yards a carry. Now, Melvin Gordon didn't play in week 1, so Javonte Williams did get the start. So again, take that with a grain of salt. He wasn't out. Melvin Gordon was out there to show what he can still do. He looked good.
Don't
but
overreact about the preseason.
Yeah, exactly. But Royce Freeman also looked good in the preseason game. So again, this is just a reminder to temper your expectations. A guy like Melvin Gordon will probably be the number 1 guy until Javonte fully takes over, and it will probably be a 50-50 split for at least the first half of the season, if not the whole season. And Melvin Gordon is averaging 2 rounds later than Javonte Williams. And sometimes, rookies are fun, but the veterans that are good, and we saw Melvin Gordon, he put up decent numbers last year. Something to keep in mind. I love Javonte Williams. Dynasty, I was all over him. I wasn't able to get him, but I was all over him. This was a guy I was hoping to target. I think he'll be good for years to come. But in redrafts, don't sleep on Melvin Gordon, especially at the value of 2 rounds later. Now, I know we're talking a lot of guys. We're waiting for, wait for Robbie Anderson over DJ Moore. Wait for Brandon Ayuk over Deebo Samuel. Wait for Melvin Gordon over Javonte Williams. Now, that's not saying, depending on who's on the board, that we're not taking any of the guys that we're saying you can wait on, but it all depends on value. If I'm debating between Javonte Williams and I shouldn't have picked him because I'm not good with, and we'll say Tyler Lockett. I think they're both going around the 5th round at the moment. We'll throw those 2 names out there, and I'm not liking the wide receivers after that. I'll probably take Tyler Lockett and then try to get Melvin Gordon 2 rounds later, just because then my team is staying balanced. So that's what we mean when we're talking. You can wait on guys. It's not always the case that we wait on those guys. I'm sure some of you are like, "Oh, I'm taking Javonte Williams. I don't want Tyler Lockett." We all know George is taking Tyler Lockett. He has Tyler Lockett every year. But
apparently, news to me.
George, I'm telling you, every year you've had Tyler Lockett. I don't know what to tell you.
If you listen to our show on how to get started, you can go back on our NFL.com history feature and see that I have not owned Tyler Lockett until last year. But anyway, I want to move on to some wide receiver. Yeah, I want to move on to some wide receiver here. And I got to talk a little bit of Eagles, because dark horse Eagles wide receiver Quez Watkins is extremely fast. He could be the team's next Deshaun Jackson. Again, we could be overactive about the preseason, but Jalen Hurts missed him by a step on a 98-yard touchdown. Next drive from Joe Flacco, he catches a screen pass for a 79-yard touchdown. If the Eagles are going to use him in the gadget game like that, and he's really got the burner speed, he could end up being somebody you're rushing to the waiver wire for. But because there's so much in front of him right now with Jalen Reagor, Devontae Smith, who didn't play in that game, even Greg Ward, who they like as their safety valve, you can't draft him as a late round flyer. But keep an eye out on Quez Watkins in the first few weeks on waivers if they do decide to use him on that offense.
Yeah, those are some great points. Now, I will remind you, don't overreact, like we've said numerous times. George just compared him to Deshaun Jackson.
Okay, now we're going to have this whole Travis Fulgham, Alshon Jeffrey thing back on me again.
Jeffrey.
Okay.
and I just because, I do love my co-host, George. He is a huge Eagles fan. As hype as he is on Quez Watkins, this is not as hype as he was on Eagles practice squad preseason legend Paul Turner.
Oh, Paul Turner.
George was hyped on him, and we haven't got to that same level of hype yet, and we saw how Paul Turner turned out. So I do love his excitement. Quez Watkins, he could be a late round guy. If he ends up being, even just that Deshaun Jackson role, and he can do that consistently, he could be like a Mecole Hardman. 1 week he'll have 2 catches for 105 yards and a touchdown. The next week he'll have 1 catch for 7 yards. That's just how it's going to play. If you need a big flyer on a flex week or you're killed with buys, maybe you'll look for a guy, Quez Watkins, if we're looking at it. But again, he was a lot of fun. If he would have pulled in 2 catches, I'm pretty sure Philly would have burnt the city down worse than they did when they win the Super Bowl.
They would have been talking Super Bowl already, and that would have been just wrong. But I think there's a couple other wide receivers we have to talk about here before we move out of news, and that would be some wide receivers with big names dealing with hopefully minor injuries. First off, it's Chase Claypool, wide receiver for the Steelers, who was carried off the field by one Big Ben with an ankle injury. Everyone was worried it was going to eat into his season significantly or entirely, but the scans came back as positive, and they expect him to have a chance for week 1. So that's good news. And then the other is one guy who I apparently own every year, Tyler Lockett, is being held out as a precaution with a groin injury. Again, that does not seem serious. He should be back for week 1. I would not move him down your board for any reason because of that, but it's preseason. All these guys who don't necessarily need preseason because they're established starters are going to get plenty of time off if they get a little injury like that.
For sure. And don't forget, we are just through preseason week 1. And even though there's not a 4th preseason game, there will still be a week in between, or I guess 2 weeks in between preseason week 3 and week 1. So there'll still be that extra rest for those guys that they'll just be doing practices and stuff like that. So being held out now is truly just a sign of precaution. But groin injuries can be tough. But that was a lot of news, a lot of reaction. I don't even know if that was all news. Some of it was just definitely our gut reactions to how we were feeling about some of the preseason games. Definitely excited to watch this coming week. But now I think it's time for everybody's segment, our favorite segment, or at least George's quotes of the week.
Now, Cody, I've realized that I normally lead this off and kind of carry it. I decided to let you start off with the first few here because they're near and dear to your heart. So go ahead and lead us off this week.
Alrighty. Well, if it's near and dear to my heart, it can only mean it's about the Green Bay Packers. And the first one is a good old story from Josh Allen. He was asked who his favorite wide receiver is. And of course, he had to say Jake Kumaro. As he said, he has 1 regular season throw and 1 touchdown. He's just a guy you root for. And then he goes on to mention how humble he is and how much of a great teammate it is. So obviously, Josh Allen has paid attention to the news, throws a little jab out there. Always fun with the Buffalo Bills, the Packers drama. I will say I'm going to add on to this story. Aaron Rodgers, we're recording this on Wednesday. Aaron Rodgers did his press conference after the Wednesday practice, and he was talking about, wide receivers and tight ends, and he mentioned a guy, I think his first name is, I don't remember, he's so low on the depth chart, his name is Brandon Confusi. His last name's Confusi. That's all that you need to know. And while he mentioned it, one of the reporters in the audience said, so have you talked to Confusi about his plans for Buffalo this year? Making a joke about how he talks about a guy and then he gets cut the next day. And Aaron Rodgers almost spits up his water as he's taking a drink and just says, Jesus, Rob, because of a joke. So apparently it's becoming a good old joke across the NFL. But speaking of Aaron Rodgers, he also had a quote at the beginning of this week. He did a little hit for, I believe it was Sirius XM, out after one of the practices last week. And he said, last year at this time, I was looking at the season as my last year in Green Bay, which I think caught everybody by surprise because we all knew Aaron Rodgers' time was coming up. We all knew that they were eventually going to probably make the transition to Jordan Love, but I think the expectation has always been it would be after this season. But we all get where he's coming from. He didn't want to be a quote-unquote lame duck quarterback, even though he has multiple years left. And maybe he saw some things from Jordan Love. And if you look back to him last year, just taking it all in, it makes sense that he was feeling that way. He plans to do that again this year. But he did in his press conference also say he doesn't know what next year brings. So could be another fun offseason. But this is George's segment, so I'm going to let him wrap it up with the last 3 quotes of the week. So get into it, my friend.
All right. Found some good ones this week for us. First one coming from Raiders quarterback Derek Carr, who said, The only thing that's different is that I've got gray hairs in my beard. He's talking about how long he can play and how he is now, I believe, reaching 30. He said he hasn't grown it out in a while, and he found 5 gray hairs in his beard, and then went on to say that he feels like he can play for another 15 years without a doubt. Nothing's hurting. It's the middle of camp. I feel great. I feel strong. I feel fast. I feel explosive. And I think it's just the way we train now. So that would mean Derek Carr playing till he's 45. Is Derek Carr good enough to play till he's 45?
No, I don't think
Didn't
so.
think so.
You never know in today's NFL. If you remember a few months ago, I think at this point, I forget which service dropped the barbershop episode where it was just a bunch of celebrities talking. One of them was Tom Brady, and he made a comment. You'd rather pick that guy over, I pause because there's an explicit word that I'm not allowed to say on air, over me. And my gut tells me it was Derek Carr. So I have no proof, no idea, no thoughts about it. But I think we'll probably never find out who the actual guy is, but I truly believe it was Derek Carr they were talking about. I'm pretty sure the Raiders offered him. He was probably thinking, hey, Southern California living. All right, well, they weren't in Southern California anymore, but Oakland, high stakes, a lot of opportunities for him, and they rolled with Derek Carr. So that was my take on that. 45 for Derek Carr just seems like a lot. But if we're going to talk about beards, I got to interrupt.
Okay.
What about Travis Kelce?
He shaved it.
I know. The dude looks like he's 30 now.
There's people making jokes you can't draft him in the first round in fantasy anymore. And I stuttered for a second. What my reaction right there is the reaction when I read that and saw his picture.
Yeah, at first I was like, who's that guy? Wow. He shaved his head and his beard, and the dude went from looking like the 26-year-old tight end to like the 31-year-old tight end like he is. And I was like, oh.
I don't even know if I'd give him 31. There was one shot I saw of him that looked like he almost looked as old as Alex Smith.
Wow. Alex Smith.
Yeah.
Well,
that's going on 40, isn't it?
Luckily, beard hairs doesn't change your draft stock. He's definitely a guy targeting end of round 1, beginning of round 2, depending on how many teams your league is. Sorry to interrupt you, George. I think you got one or maybe 2 more good quotes for us.
Yep. I was going to cut it after one, but the last one is the one I teased, so stick with us here. First, I got Ravens linebacker CJ Mosley talking about
Jets linebacker.
Jets now. My bad. I even put that note later. So CJ Mosley talking about teams treating them like the same old Jets. And they said, if people come with that same mentality, they are going to get their butts blown out. It's explicit there, just like you did on that last one. So I think Robert Saleh has really got this team to buy in, and CJ Mosley pretty much put it all in perspective there with one sentence to the media. The Jets are fired up, and we'll see if this whole new team can bring it on. But I was going to wrap it up here until I saw an Eagles page that I follow on Facebook talk about safety Kayvon Wallace talking to Cam Newton at their joint practice this week. And he said, not only are you only throwing checkdowns, that's all you ever do over and over. You're the king of it. Kayvon Wallace calling Cam Newton the king of checkdowns.
Alex Smith.
Right? I mean, but I feel like he's saying he's not even as good as Alex Smith at that.
No, but, that's... we always called them check down Charlies, but maybe we're going to call them check down Cams from now on.
Check down Cams. We'll call them check down Cams on the Couch GMs here.
All right. Check down Cams. That's how we refer to any quarterback that only throws touchdowns from now on. We did tease a little bit. Cam Newton not looking good. Mac Jones did look pretty impressive. That was the one rookie quarterback we didn't talk about at the top of the show because we had to keep the show moving, and we're going to keep it moving some more as we're going to get into some more just straight up fantasy news. Drafts are happening, and we want to talk about some bounce back players. Alrighty, so I'll kick it off with my first bounce back player. And if you are a long-time listener to the show, first, thank you. But you know where I'm going here. Quarterback Matthew Stafford. Now, I know I talked about it at the beginning with Trey Lance. The Shanahan-McVay system sometimes is not, friendly for first-time quarterbacks. Matt Stafford may struggle a little bit. but I honestly believe Matt Stafford will finish the season as a quarterback 1, so that it's top 12 by most standards. I'd probably put him at 10, right around the 10 to 12 range. So a solid quarterback guy that you're getting very late at the end of drafts. Um, and honestly, while George is talking, I will look up the numbers because I should have had them. Sorry for not being more prepared,
Not
Professor
prepared
Neal.
over here.
I didn't have my 8 Ps. I'm sorry. But I will definitely I'll look it up. But I'm pretty sure I mentioned it earlier when we were doing the quarterback ranking. The difference between quarterback 1 and quarterback 10 was like 65 points, which if you break that across the whole season, that's not that many points of a game for a guy that you can get between, compared to Patrick Mahomes is going in round 3, you can get him around 13, 10 rounds later. That's a great value. So I love Matthew Stafford. Now I will say, just to show my true bias, my good friend and cousin, I texted him last year that Matt Stafford was a dark horse MVP candidate. He definitely was not. So, hear what I'm saying. I do have a little bit of bias towards Matt Stafford, but I do think with the weapons of Robert Woods or Bobby Trees that we like to call him here at the Couch GMs, Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson, Tyler Higbee. I know they did lose Cam Akers, but I still trust that run game. I think Sean McVay, I think he is primed for a big season. If not this year, it'll definitely happen next year because it'll be year 2, but I like him already in year 1 of this offense.
I'm really a little upset that Tyler's not here now because he would be livid about us talking up Matt Stafford.
Yeah, he
But
would tell
I'm
me to
with
take
you
Jared
on the Matt
Goff.
Stafford train. He would tell you to take Jared Goff. And who do I think is a bounce back player? Not Jared Goff. Okay, I'll go to my first one here while you look up some stats on Matt Stafford. And that would be running back Austin Eckler. Now, you can say Austin Eckler did actually have a pretty solid season last year when he played. And that was his first season basically being an all-time starter because that was was that their first year without Melvin Gordon? I believe it was. Um
I think you're
anyway,
right.
yeah. But Austin Eckler, I expect to come out and he's being drafted right around the end of the first round, beginning of the second round. I like that value for him, especially in PPR leagues where he can catch a lot of passes. We know that he has the ability to be a 3-down back, but he is really a pass catching back first, in my opinion, and that plays really well towards fantasy. I expect no hesitations from Austin Eckler. He's going to be my first bounce back player. Did I buy you enough time over there, Cody?
You did. Austin Eckler is a great option. And just, I did circle back on the stats. Last year, the number 1 quarterback um, averaged about 26.9. Nice. 27 points
Nice.
per game. And the number 10 was tied for 22.2 points per game. So we're
4 points a
talking,
game?
huh?
4 points a game. That's it.
Well, 4.7. So we'll say 5. 5 points a
Okay.
game. So again, this is another reason why we're so high on late round quarterbacks is because, yes, it is so nice to have an elite quarterback. It feels like you're succeeding because you have a guy you can consistently count on. But quarterback 1 to quarterback 10 is an average of 5 points a game. Just keep that in mind when you're drafting. Back to your pick, though, Austin Eckler. He's the guy that for years I was like, there's no way I'm taking Austin Eckler. Sorry, there's a hair on my mic and it's distracting me, but I'm going to keep talking. Hopefully the audio isn't too bad with me playing with it. But Austin Eckler is a guy for sure that in years past, he was like, hey, I'm not taking him. This year, he's a guy that I want to talk about too much because I know there are people listening to the show that I'm in fantasy leagues with that I'm trying to pull in the second round, and I might have a late second round pick and he's going early second. I kind of want him to slide. Um, I think he has all the potential in the world. He's definitely a guy I'm targeting in PPR, half point PPR, and he looks good in the running game as long as he can stay healthy. So I love the potential for an Austin Eckler bounce back week. Honestly, if he's healthy, this is a bold statement. If he's healthy all season long, he'll finish as a top 3 running back. We'll say that.
Top 3.
Yep. If he's healthy all season, I don't think he'll be healthy all season long.
Wow. I could see him missing a few games too. It's just the way he plays. But I
And
would have been bold enough to maybe say top 5, top 3.
yeah, and I'm now I'm gonna sound like I'm backtracking a little bit. I was thinking, half point PPR or even full point PPR.
Okay, that helps.
Not so much standard scoring because he's not gonna outrush Derrick Henry he's not going to outrush any of the top 4 or 5 that we're drafting. But if Austin Eckler is healthy, I love his upside.
It could be Alvin Kamara, Austin Eckler, if they all both play a full season in PPR.
For sure, 100%.
Mhm.
A guy I'm going to talk about for my next guy to bounce back. Now, he doesn't have the huge upside like Austin Eckler does. But again, I guess there's a trend to this. If you've been listening to the show for a long time, you might know where I'm going with it. And I'm one of the only Couch GMs here out of the hosts that are in on Daniel Jones this season. Now, he might not have looked
Yep,
the
you're
best
alone.
the preseason game, but again, we're not overreacting. I am looking for a good uptick, a good potential for him to break out. I've compared it a little bit to Josh Allen's year 3, and I'm not saying he's going to be right up there with the MVP case, but I think with that defense, a healthy Saquon, he'll be able to at least be above average as quarterback. And who's the quarterback's best friend? Tight end. So the guy I'm looking as a bounce back option is Evan Ingram. Hopefully he's figured out his hands issues. For fantasy wise, there's a lot of talks with the whole Kyle Rudolph injury and the whole how that contract played out. They knew he needed surgery, but they still gave him a contract. And now there's some issue with that. He's not fully healthy yet. If he can figure out how to catch the ball again, like he was his first couple years of the season, I know that could be a big ask, but that definitely sounded like I said big ass, and I definitely meant to say big ask. Sorry for anyone listening under the age of 12 that thinks that's a bad word. But anyways, back to Evan Ingram. They have Kenny Galladay now. They drafted Kadarius Toney. They have Sterling Shepard. They have weapons. But again, the quarterback's best friend is their tight end. If Daniel Jones is going to break out, I think it's going to be by feeding Evan Ingram. And it's another guy. He used to be drafted tight end 5, tight end 4. Well, he's had 2 rough seasons. He's now down at tight end 10, tight end 12, sometimes tight end 14. At that point, he has the upside to be a top 5 to top 7 tight end that you might want to consider taking if you're in rounds, 12 to 15 and you still haven't taken your tight end.
I mean, I'll say I actually did have a fantasy draft. I was going to check on my team and how it came out because I punted tight end. I waited till the very end of the draft and basically took tight ends in round, I think it was 11 and 13. And I actually got Evan Ingram in round 13.
Exactly.
Like, that's insane. I mean, I'll admit I'm definitely not as high on Daniel Jones. I'm not super optimistic that Evan Ingram's going to be a guy that's going to be on my team at the end of the season. But like you said, there's so much potential there that especially at that value, I could not say no. I'll say I drafted Cole Kmet over him because that's something we didn't talk about with the rookie quarterbacks. It looked like Justin Fields like Cole Kmet when he was on the field with him. But Evan Ingram is a steal where he's going in drafts, and the chance at the boom, I agree with you on that. I just don't know if I agree that he could be a top 5 tight end again, but in a position where it doesn't take much to be a top 10, it's possible.
For sure. I like it. I think you got another bounce back player that I wish was on my list because I love this guy.
And a guy who, again, is coming back from injury. I feel like I kind of went with the guys coming back from injury, and you went with the guys who are a little lower on the draft board, but that's okay. It's good. We have a little bit of a mix between the two of us. Another 2nd to 3rd round pick is running back Joe Mixon. Mixon got off to a really slow start last year, started to bring it together for a few weeks, and then went down with his foot injury, didn't play the rest of the season, and I think kind of left a bad taste in some people's mouths because of how high he was drafted last year, and then was pretty much invisible for the first, was like 3 or 4 weeks of the season. But the dude's legit, and the Cincinnati offense is really coming together. He has so many more weapons around him, and now a second-year quarterback in Joe Burrow. Joe and Joe could be dealing out there in Cincinnati, and Joe Mixon's somebody I want on my team because I know the potential and think he's going to come back stronger than ever.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. As a guy who drafted him last year, as a guy that drafted him over Devontae Adams last year, as a Packers fan.
That's also, yeah.
I have no buyer's remorse. I would take him again this year. Injuries happen. I love his
And that's how you
potential.
should play it. A lot of people play with their heart, and people that play with their heart might be a little bit heartbroken by Joe Mixon, and I'm glad you said that because you shouldn't be. He's legit. He still deserves to be taken in that
Yeah,
same
and
spot.
he's very underrated in the passing game as well, which not
Mhm.
talked about a lot, but he does see targets in the passing game. So I do love Joe Mixon, but I'll hit my final
And his
bounce.
passing back actually just has left because Giovanni Bernard was the passing down back really there, and now he's in Tampa Bay.
Another very good point. But
Yeah.
I'm going to hit you with my last bounce back guy. I dipped into your playbook a little bit. I went with a guy coming off injury or injuries, and that is running back Raheem Mostert of the San Francisco 49ers.
He's always coming back from injuries.
He is, but he has so much potential. And I know the old saying is that any running back in the Shanahan offense can run for 1,000 yards. It's true. I get it. There is definitely some truth to that. They drafted Trey Sermon, big fan of his. They brought over Wayne Gallman, who was decent in replacing Saquon Barkley last year. So they still have Jeff Wilson. There's going to be guys in that locker room. It's not going to be a 100% split from Raheem Mostert. But if you think back to weeks 1, 2, and I think it was week 3 when he got hurt versus the Jets, I'm not our friend Jordan Bernard. I can't remember every game, every week. But
We'll
I
bring him
do
on the
think
podcast sometime just to do some magic tricks for y'all.
that should be. We should just do an Instagram live with Jordan Bernard and have people send him
Sounds
invites.
good.
All right,
Yes.
stay tuned for that. But back to Raheem Mostert. He looked electric, dynamic. He's perfect fit for that wide zone scheme. And again, he's going a little bit later. You know, I don't think he's quite fallen under Trey Sermon yet, but they're getting very close. And as much as I love, rookies, I'm normally the guy that's taking way too many rookies because we just spent all offseason getting so hyped for all these rookies. It's hard not to overvalue them in your fantasy drafts. But don't forget about the veteran players that are good players, and Raheem Mostert is definitely one of those. So I look for him to have a pretty big bounce back season. It might not be, league winning, but definitely see him as a guy, if healthy, can be a solid RB2 flex option for sure.
And normally I would be fighting you on this because I hate all these committees that are impossible to read. But honestly, I feel like San Francisco has shown a little bit of respect to Raheem Mostert when he's healthy over the last few years. Like when he's out, you really it's a dart throw to figure out who's going to get the carries most of the time. You can sometimes figure it out for this week or that week because some guy did good the past week and they give it to the hot hand. But when Mostert's been healthy, it's actually been Mostert for majority of the carries. So I'm trying to get over that fear a little bit, trying to get away from the Shanahanigans and say that they've shown that Mostert can be a number one running back. Please stay on the field if you're going to do that, but we'll see.
Please,
Maybe this
I
is the
like that.
year.
Please stay on the field. And I think please stay on the field is what you're saying for your final bounce back guy.
I am, and this one's for you, Tyler. Julio Jones is a Titan, and he's also a bounce back player this year. Julio Jones, the only thing he has to do that he hasn't done the last few years is catch touchdowns. If he's still down in Atlanta, I would say if he stays on the field, he's good for 1,300 yards, 2 touchdowns, because that's how it's been. Now you're putting him in an offense that is trying to, I would say I don't want to say trying to throw the ball more because you have Derrick Henry, but you have the ability to throw the ball to so many more open receivers because they have to stack the box for Derrick Henry. You have just as good of a wide receiver across from him. We had Calvin Ridley across from him in Atlanta. You have A.J. Brown across from him now in Tennessee. If Julio Jones can catch 6 touchdowns, he's going to be right back to good old Julio Jones that you're drafting in the top tier receivers. And he's going in the second or third tier receivers down in rounds 3 and 4, I want to say, in most drafts I've seen. Julio Jones can be a steal. He's my bounce back player. I don't have anything else to say. Cody, go ahead.
Yeah, only thing I got to say is go back. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? We did the mock draft episode. I had one of the top picks, and I ended up taking AJ Brown in round 2, and then round 5, I was like, well, I wish I would have took Julio, but I don't want both wide receivers. So definitely something to
Again,
pay attention.
the situation of the draft board falling to you. If there's other receivers you like up there with AJ Brown, wait on Julio.
Yeah. Again, it's always a risk, as we saw numerous times in that mock draft. The guys we were targeting didn't make it back to us. So it is always a little bit of a risk when you're playing fantasy football. But I think that's why we love it. I think that's why we do this show for you guys. We love talking fantasy football. We would talk about it if we didn't have a mic and a camera. But
we have many years.
Yep. And now we just decided to talk about it and put it out there for other people to listen. And if you are listening, I just want to say thank you. We love doing the show. We love when you guys get involved. I know Tyler's not here to give his little ramble about it's more fun for you and more fun for us when you get involved. But I'll let George hit it up. But guys, thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you guys for listening. And it is much more fun for you and much more fun for us when you get involved. We're here to help you prepare for your drafts. We're getting into prime draft season, and we're trying to get more people into the sport with our how-to videos. Another one was posted this week. We're going to try to start ramping those up to get them out for you guys. And if there's anything that you want to hear or think that other people are going to want to hear when they're getting into fantasy football, let us know. Give us a direct message, a comment on this video, post it on our social media channels, even send it to us from thecouchgms.com. Get involved. We want to hear you guys and make the experience for you as good as we can. But again, thank you all for listening in to this episode of the Couch GMs podcast. For Cody Roadcap, I'm George Kerth, and we'll see you all next week.
Boom, nice.